After planting the US flag, Neil Armstrong went back into the lunar module, where they noticed a tiny broken switch lying in the moon's dust. And that switch was the only way to power the engine and get back to Earth. Without it, they were stuck on the moon forever. And this was just one of the 5 times Apollo 11 mission nearly ended in disaster. Let's start with the first one. Inside this lunar module, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were heading toward the moon's surface, separated from the command module, where Michael Collins waited in orbit to pick them up later. The landing was supposed to take 12 minutes and 30 seconds, and for the first 6 minutes, everything looked perfect. But right around 6 minutes and 30 seconds in, 10 kilometers above the surface, a master alarm lit up. The computer flashed a message they had never seen before. Neil called it out to Mission Control in Houston.
1202.
Buzz quickly confirmed,
1202.
but neither of them knew what it meant, and if they didn't figure it out fast, they'd have to abort. In Mission Control, Flight Director Gene Kranz turned to his team and asked, "Do we need to abort?" All eyes went to a young engineer, Jack Garman, the guy who had memorized every alarm code. Jack recognized it. He had seen this one in a simulation. It meant the computer was overloaded, but it was still running the critical programs just fine. Steve gave the call.
Eagle Houston, you are go for landing. Go for landing, over.
But the alarms kept coming. Each time, Mission Control gave the green light. We're still go. But here's what made this moment so intense. They were just 10 kilometers above the moon, billions of dollars spent. 6 astronauts lost in earlier missions, over 650 million people watching live. And if they had aborted now, this mission, the first to land humans on the moon, would have ended with a quiet, big failure. But anyhow, that wasn't the only time they came close to aborting. As the lunar module descended from 10 kilometers to under 2,000 feet, Armstrong looked out the window, and what he saw was not what they had trained for. Instead of a smooth landing site, they were heading straight toward a field of massive boulders, with a giant fresh crater right in the middle of it. The crater was roughly the size of a football field, and yes, the onboard computer was aiming directly for it. Now, if you're thinking, what the hell was the computer doing? You need to know something cool about it. Open your Snapchat, try the dog filter. Now, what you're looking at, that one single filter, is millions of times smarter than the computer that landed humans on the moon. And I'm not even talking about your phone or the Snapchat app, just that one filter. So yeah, Armstrong didn't trust the computer. He grabbed the hand controller and took manual control. He started flying the lander sideways, searching for a clear spot to touch down. Buzz Aldrin's calling out altitude and speed like a human GPS, but flying manually wasn't part of the plan. And that's when the next problem hit. The LM was burning more fuel than expected. Suddenly, the low fuel warning light turned on. That light meant they now had just 90 seconds of fuel left. In Houston, everyone was holding their breath. Armstrong was still flying sideways, still trying to dodge craters and boulders. At around 100 feet above the moon, Mission Control started the 60 seconds countdown. Buzz kept calling out altitude numbers. Armstrong looked calm, but this was the edge. So close to landing, and just as close to crashing. The Mission Control calls 30 seconds. The rule was clear. If they didn't land before fuel hit 0, they had to abort immediately. At this low altitude, just 100 feet above the surface, an abort could mean tipping the lander, even exploding. Everyone in Mission Control was frozen, holding their breath. Then, with just 15 seconds of fuel left, Armstrong's voice came through the radio.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Charlie Duke, the astronaut back in Houston handling radio communications, replied,
Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
You can hear the sigh of relief in the audio. The most iconic landing in history with just 15 seconds of fuel left. Well, that's what they thought. Later, engineers discovered there were actually over 45 seconds of fuel still left in the tank. But no one knew that in the moment. Everyone at Mission Control finally started breathing again, but no one knew what was waiting for them on the surface of the moon. The next problem was so big that the President of the United States had to... After the landing, Neil and Buzz were supposed to rest for a few hours before stepping outside, but they couldn't wait. They were too excited to take that first step on the moon. They asked for permission to skip the rest and head out early, and Mission Control said yes. For the next couple of hours, they explored the moon, picked up some rocks, took photos, planted the US flag, and then climbed back into the lunar module. The first moonwalk was officially successful. They sealed the hatch and finally had a moment to breathe. They were exhausted. Their backpacks were heavy, the suits were bulky. They'd been awake for over 21 hours, and now the only thing left to do was sleep. But just as they were settling down, Buzz noticed something strange. On the floor, there was a tiny, broken switch lying in the moon's dust. At first, it looked like nothing, but when he looked closer, it hit him. That switch had snapped off from the panel. And it wasn't just any switch. It was the one that sends power to the Ascent engine, the engine they needed to leave the moon. Without it, the engine wouldn't start, which meant they were stuck there forever. Most likely, one of their backpacks had bumped it off while they were moving around the tight little cabin. They immediately reported the issue to Mission Control. But the team in Houston didn't have a fix. They told the astronauts to get some rest while they figured it out. But imagine trying to sleep on the moon, knowing there's a chance you might never wake up on Earth again. The lunar module only had 48 hours of oxygen. No rescue mission was even possible at that time. Collins was still orbiting above in the command module, but he couldn't do anything to help, and neither Neil nor Buzz had been trained for a situation like this. That's how serious it was. The problem was so real that President Nixon had already written a speech, just in case they never made it back. It began with, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace." But here's the best part about Buzz Aldrin. He had a degree in mechanical engineering. I mean, seriously, what are the odds of that? By the next morning, Mission Control was still working on a fix. But after getting a bit of rest, Buzz took another look at the broken switch. He started thinking, not like an astronaut, but like an engineer. What's the basic job of a switch? All it does is connect or disconnect power in a circuit, that's it. So Buzz realized if he could find anything that could safely bridge that gap and complete the circuit, he didn't need the actual switch at all. But it had to be non-metallic. No fingers, no metal tools. One wrong spark could short the system, or worse. Then he remembered something. In the pocket of his suit, he had a felt-tipped pen. It was designed by NASA to work in space, and best of all, it was made of plastic. Buzz carefully lined up the pen with the circuit slot, took a breath, and pushed. The Ascent engine was live. With that one plastic pen, the entire mission was back on track. Today, that pen is displayed in the Smithsonian Museum, right next to the suit Buzz wore when he broke the switch. They were finally ready to lift off from the moon and return home, or at least that's what they thought. After surviving the moon landing and the broken switch, Neil, Buzz, and Michael were finally heading home. Their spacecraft was still in two main parts: the command module, where the astronauts were seated and which would carry them back to Earth, and the service module, which had powered the mission with engines, electricity, oxygen, and water. Now here's the thing. The command module was built with a heat shield designed to survive the intense heat of re-entry, and the service module was simply not. It was never meant to come back. The plan was simple. Right before entering Earth's atmosphere, the service module would break off, use its thrusters to push itself far away, and burn up safely in the distance. The astronauts weren't even supposed to see it again. But that's not what happened. Around 2,000 kilometers from Earth, they triggered the separation. The service module detached, but instead of drifting away on a separate path, it stayed close. Way too close. Neil looked out the window and saw the massive service module still floating near them. That shouldn't have been possible. According to its planned path, it should have already been long gone. Buzz called the Mission Control.
Houston, we got the service module going by. A little high and a little bit to the right.
According to the math, they shouldn't have been able to see it at all, and then it started to break apart, big pieces, flying in every direction. Now here's why that's terrifying. The command module was about to hit Earth's atmosphere at 24,000 kilometers per hour, and the only thing protecting them was that heat shield. One wrong bump from a floating piece of metal could damage the angle, or tear the shield, and if that happened, they'd burn up. And the way we talk about Apollo 11 today would be a very different story. So what did Mission Control and the astronauts do? Well, nothing. There was nothing they could do. They just sat there, staring through the window as pieces of the service module floated by, hoping none of them came too close. And honestly, I don't know what kind of heavenly path they were on, but not a single piece hit them, piece by piece. Everything missed. The command module entered Earth's atmosphere successfully and splashed down safely in the ocean. That's the biggest miracle of the mission. After surviving the alarms, the switch, and almost burning up, the astronauts decided to celebrate the best way possible, so they pulled out their phones and subscribed to OSC. Honestly, that was the real highlight of the mission. I still remember like it was yesterday.